So we will go ahead and start. Just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. On behalf of Boomerang Carnets, we are very pleased that you all could join this webinar today. My name is Kyle Urson. I am a Carnet specialist with Boomerang here out of our headquarters in Barrington, Illinois. Have a lot of experience with these types of presentations. However, normally I'm presenting on the benefits of the Carnets, the nuts and bolts as far as the mechanics of the document and the usage. But today's different, and it's also special. Today, along with Curt Wilson, President and CEO of Boomerang Carnets, we also have Declan Daly from the U.S. CIB to present the benefits of Carnet use from your vantage point, that of a Chief Financial Officer. As we go here, I just wanted to let everybody know that you can feel free to type your questions, if you have any, into the Q&A or into the chat. We will reserve time at the end for a Q&A session. So we'll just jump right into it. The Carnet, U.S. companies have tremendous amounts, can have tremendous amounts of cash on deposit with foreign customs or tied up in duty drawback claims with U.S. customs because they are not using ATA Carnets for their temporary exports. Those can last up for to years and cost money annually to maintain. U.S. companies who are unaware of the benefits of ATA Carnets for temporary exports have the administrative cost of managing overseas deposits, ensuring duty and tax recovery refunds, as well as administration salaries. There are also budgetary unknowns such as permanent entry costs, costs of claims for failure to re-export, and also foreign exchange rate changes. You can cause a permanent loss just due to foreign exchange rate change. So before we get into what the Carnet is, I'd like to introduce Curt Wilson. He is our president and CEO at Boomerang Carnets. Curt directs and oversees all day-to-day operations, taking ultimate responsibility for quality and customer service. Curt's experience and expertise includes Carnet bond underwriting, logistics, Carnet claims management, client relationship management, cargo insurance, and also new product development. In 2015, Curt oversaw the expansion of Boomerang Carnets into the United Kingdom. Boomerang Carnets is the only company issuing ATA Carnets in 2 different countries anywhere throughout the world. Also with us, we have the pleasure of having Declan Daly with the United States Council for International Business. Declan is the Senior Vice President and CFO of the U.S. CIB. Declan oversees ATA Carnet, trade services, and IT at the Council. Declan has over 30 years of accounting, finance, business, and operations experience across many different industries on a global scale. Declan has expertise in global multimedia, trading, environmental services, and publishing companies. Declan is also a CPA. So thank you for joining us, Declan. What is the ATA Carnet? It's also referred to as the merchandise passport or a passport for your goods. It's an international unified customs document, and it allows for temporary entry of goods on a duty-free and tax-free basis into a worldwide system of countries, whether shipped or hand-carried. The Carnet system was established by the International ATA Convention and is governed by international treaty between the World Customs Organization and the International Chamber of Commerce's World Chambers Federation. The aim is to encourage world trade and reduce trade barriers created by different national customs regulations. The initials ATA themselves are from the French and English words admission temporaire, temporary admission. U.S. Customs appointed the U.S. Council for International Business as the National Guaranteeing Association, or what we consider the NGA, for ATA Carnets in the United States. Curt, why don't you do us a favor and tell us who Boomerang Carnets is?
Thank you, Kyle, very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, Declan, thank you for participating today. Boomerang Carnets was established in 1987. It as an appointed ATA Carnet service provider in the United States to the U.S. Council for International Business. On the average year, we issue 9,000 plus carnets and specialize in the actual issuing, management, as well as the customer usage of the carnets and the underwriting and the procurement of the required security, which in this case is usually Carnet bond. We're also a licensed insurance broker and have been in the trade business as a family business since the early 1930s. Thank you, Kyle.
And Declan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself as well as who the USCIB is.
Thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Curt, too, for inviting me to this webinar today. I'm always very happy and excited to have an opportunity to talk about the many benefits of the ATA Carnet. So first, let me just talk about USCIB, or the United States Council for International Business. We are an international trade association. We were founded in 1945, and actually we existed long before that, going back as far as 1919, when we were part of the International Chamber of Commerce. And then in 1945, when the United Nations was created, the founding members decided to move us out of DC, which is where we were based, to New York, the business capital of the world, and closer to the United Nations. Again, with the aim of us being the business voice of all our members. And again, we are a member-driven organization with a multi-sectoral membership made up of 300 multinational companies, law firms, and industry business associations. Our members' industries are multiple: food and beverage, financial services, retail, technology, energy, oil and gas, and pharma, just to name a few. We are the sole U.S. affiliate of 3 of the largest business organizations in the world: the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris, the International Organization of Employers in Geneva, and the business at OECD, also in Paris. These platforms, or these international platforms, give us access to global policy makers and regulatory authorities in the world. And that's really what sets us apart from any other trade organization in the US. But in addition to all the policy work that we do on behalf of our members, we are also very proud of the fact that we are involved in the nuts and bolts of the trade facilitation and trade industry. And that being that we manage the ATA Carnet business in the US. As Kyle mentioned earlier, we were appointed by the Department of Treasury back in 1969 to do so. And today, we work very closely with our partners, Curt, Boomerang Carnets, to really expand and grow the Carnet business in the US.
Thank you, Declan.
So as I mentioned, I'm very happy to be here today to talk about why you should care about ATA Carnets, and most importantly, the risks of not using them. You know, we're all CFOs, and I think we all saw last year when the pandemic first hit that if you had cash reserves at the time, a lot of companies were able to survive, and those that didn't were not. And cash reserves and liquidity became more important than ever. So when we look at the tools that we can use as CFOs today to manage our cash flow and to avoid having cash unnecessarily deployed overseas as deposits, then that is obviously a big help for everyone. So if you don't use a Carnet, you're increasing the risk of tying up cash overseas in different deposits with foreign customs organizations. And you can have this cash tied up for extended periods of time. We'll go into a little later many of the benefits of the ATA Carnet, but what it'll do is it'll really reduce that cash outlay, and you'll be able to utilize cash in a much more effective manner. Next slide, Kyle, please. So again, why you should care about using the ATA Carnet and then what it brings to the table. So we all know as CFOs, you want to know what your cash projections are. Sometimes if you use an ATA Carnet, you know upfront what those costs are. You can take out an ATA Carnet with Boomerang Carnets, and you'll know in advance, and you'll be able to do it in the US, and you'll know what those costs are. And again, you're saving yourself on the huge deposits that you would have to outlay if you didn't go for an ATA Carnet. And especially if you're taking your product to many different countries. So imagine yourself as a fashion house, and you're taking your clothing or retail stuff overseas, and you're going to many different countries, you might, if you weren't using a ATA Carnet, have to contact a freight forwarder or a broker in all those different countries and do some other type of entry, temporary import bond, into several different countries. Again, heavy cash outlays. The other thing an ATA Carnet allows you to do is reduce your administrative cost. You don't have someone who has to, cover all those entries into different countries and spend all this time doing that. It's very simple. You have an expert service like Boomerang Carnets who can manage all that for you. And then, lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is the effect it has on positive cash flow. You want to retain your cash. Like I said earlier, you want to make sure that you're able to maintain your cash balances and put them to the most effective use. Placing them with overseas deposits is not the most effective use of that. Keeping it in-house and really reducing your cost by using an ATA Carnet is the way to go.
Thank you, Declan. That was actually, you refreshed my memory on a lot of the of the issues that I've learned over the years. So that was very good to hear again. Springing from Declan's discussion, as you can see, this slide shows various commodities, from jewelry to aviation equipment to drones, robotics, production equipment. All these goods are constantly put on ATA Carnet now. When you're temporarily exporting commercial goods, it generates new revenues from getting new accounts. With the savings from the elimination of the import duty and the import tax, the VAT tax, you eliminate all those extra costs, as well as provide for flexibility in going into multiple countries with one customs document. And by the way, from a security standpoint, an ATA Carnet is one of the few customs declaration documents that has to be approved by 2 customs authorities before entry is allowed. And it really does help customs authorities across the world to protect the revenue of their country's customs service, as well as provide for a little bit of an extra layer of security, which is quite needed in today's world. On the flip side of that, permanent entries are just the tie-up of costs and extra administrative expenses. This slide is an example of a very large company in the U.S. that were up to it at one time, used almost 1,800 carnets in 1 year. They were rolling out a new product, and as you can see in the picture, they specialized in routers, as the English say, routers. And it was a worldwide rollout at a time when the internet was just about catching on fire, and the country in which they concentrated a lot of their exports under Carnet to was Japan. And in the midst of this huge number of Carnet usage going into Japan, the upper management made a business decision to change from using Carnets to do permanent entries, because the import duty, or what they call the consumption tax in Japan, was at 5%, which was a very low combined duty and tax ratio, because their goods, most of those goods were duty free. So they were weighing the expense of getting Carnets and having whatever administrative roles that department would play to paying just 5% consumption tax. So much to our chagrin, as a for-profit organization, they decided to stop using Carnets. Not entirely, but the volume of Carnet usage dropped drastically. As you can see, they had, in a 5-year period, they had $1,850,000 plus the cost of maintaining deposits that were on these permanent entries, loss of interest on the money, and loss of return on investments as far as their profits were concerned. Permanent entries also cost an additional fee because you have to have what they call an importer of record in those countries. And this company did, but they also had to retain and hire customs brokers, as well as last mile delivery of these goods within Japan. And if anyone has ever flown into Japan and flown into Tokyo International, it's a good 2 hours from the center of Tokyo, where Narita International is. So all those expenses added up. And if you take the benefits of carnets, putting aside the tax and duties, but the clearance of customs, it's a much smoother clearance process under an ATA Carnet. So in addition, this company also was filing for duty and tax recovery refunds, which VAT recovery is a very big business, but it takes a lot of record keeping. It takes a lot of proof presentation in order to qualify for those refunds and the claims for money back from customs services, which, customs across the world, their main responsibility is to protect the revenue of a country. And in so doing, to return money is not as easy as one would think. In addition, which I think is a point that gets overlooked quite often, is the foreign exchange rate changes and the fluctuations. And we in the U.S. Council battle that quite often because it is fluctuating much more frequently than it used to. And the difference in currencies can be quite a big difference, and in a much shorter time these days. So one thing that people forget, and including myself, is foreign exchange rates are a big factor when you're getting a carnet. In addition to all the cash that goes into the foreign customs as a deposit, it continues to build up very, very quickly. It's a loss of cash flow, again, that is constantly weighing on the credit and the cash power of a company. As our example continues to say here, $2 million was continually on deposit with the Japanese customs, awaiting for these tax recovery refunds. So an additional cost of maintaining these duties annually, exchange rate exposure over time, the permanent entry process and the costs and fees associated with that, and then filing for these recoveries is something that's completely eliminated by using an ATA Carnet.
Thanks, Curt. And I'll just touch on, I know we've gone through some of these already, what Carnet bring in terms of cost control. But before I do, I just want to mention too, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, that there are 80 plus countries and territories that are part of the worldwide Carnet system. And in terms of the number of Carnets issued on a worldwide basis, there is approximately 185,000 Carnets issued for goods valued at $25 billion. In the US here, the value of goods on our Carnets is close to $6 billion. We have some Carnet holders in the US who use Carnets for very, very expensive goods, ranging from airplanes themselves going to the Paris Air Show, or to expensive pieces of artwork that's taken overseas to show to potential buyers. So you can imagine without an ATA Carnet to put those goods on, they would be paying huge amounts of money and outlays in cash otherwise. So that's in terms of our cost control. Number one, we save expensive duties and taxes with foreign customs. And as Curt mentioned, foreign exchange is a big thing. I mean, we've had ourselves, our organization, a bunch of payments we had to make to the UK this year alone, and that rate has really fluctuated over the course of 2021. And then with ATA Carnets, you avoid duties and taxes. As I mentioned here, tariffs may not be going up, but taxes certainly are. Some of the countries in the EU have very high VAT rates, VAT rates. And again, you save the additional cost of permanent entries and filing for duty and taxes and recovery funds. That takes time. You're dealing with foreign customs organizations. They're not always the most timely. And the time difference between when you make that deposit and when you get that refund back, eventually, there could be huge fluctuations in exchange rates. And then, again, avoiding incurring claims for failure to re-export. With Carnets, we work with you. You know, the USCIB works very closely with Carnet holders. If a Carnet does go beyond its one-year general period, then we can either look to get a replacement Carnet to extend that period, or we will work on your behalf with the foreign customs organizations in whatever country your Carnet may be in to try and mitigate those claims. And lastly, with an ATA Carnet, it works very much like your own passport. It's a passport for goods, so that every border your Carnet and goods pass over, there is a stamp or a signature from that national customs organization. So you'll know a history and be able to track the borders that the Carnet passed and the goods passed by the stamps and signatures on your Carnet, which is extremely important and very valuable.
Thank you, Declan. Again, learning something every time. All right, one of the two orchestras and bands we have as industries that are extensive Carnet users, of course, are the high-valued symphony orchestras, as well as the pop bands. And we have the Rolling Stones here that are presently on tour in the United States, minus their old drummer, but they're still kicking. And one of the good things about these two industries, mainly the rock and roll industry, is most of the equipment that comes out of that supports these bands while they're on tour is out of the United States. That's why the Rolling Stones historically have always started their tours in the U.S., as well as groups like Paul McCartney. They all have rental goods that go on ATA Carnet, and a big world tour like the Rolling Stones or a symphony orchestra, the entertainment bands usually get multiple Carnets. Orchestras in their international tours, of course, and live entertainment has been sequestered for the last year and a half, but we're seeing signs that these tours that have such high values would probably be cost ineffective without Carnets. And the costs of all these countries on their duties and tax deposits would be prohibitive to, one, making any revenue profits, as well as tying up, again, all this cash. So they're saving millions and millions of dollars on duty and tax and other costs when they're using Carnets. And that's why they charge so much for their tickets.
Thank you, Curt. Before we do the Q&A, we'll just say a little bit about how easy it is, to apply for an ATA Carnet. It is not a complicated process. As Declan had alluded to earlier, you're not posting a TIB or a duty drawback or an individual form of entry into each and every country. The Carnet, it's good for 12 months. It's good for 87 plus countries, and the application process itself really couldn't be easier. It's an online application. We're available 24/7 to answer any questions. We walk people through the application all the time. Once it comes in, it gets assigned to a specialist like myself, who's going to work with you on a one-by-one basis to go through all your needs, all your trip details, make sure we're including enough certificates to support your itinerary. You're also applying for the Carnet's bond at the same time you're submitting the application for the Carnet itself. So again, less paperwork that you have to fill out. You don't need to go to an outside surety company and bring your own bond. You're applying for it at the same time. And that's the security that Curt was talking about that goes behind the Carnet that acts as the guarantee to foreign customs that the duties and taxes would be paid in the event of the non-re-exportation of the goods. Again, 24/7, 365, we truly are available. Curt, I know, can tell you it takes calls in the middle of the night more often than he probably cares to admit, holidays, weekends, etc. There's a compliance toolkit that we can offer. And also, again, Boomerang benefit. It's a phrase alluding to the fact that we are the only Carnet issuer that can issue both U.S. originating goods and UK originating goods Carnets. And again, hammering it home, it's not an expensive document. It's a great way to cut down your costs for your temporary exports. And with that, we will bring it to the question and answer segment. I think there was a couple of brief ones that did get asked. I don't know if, light's going off on me again. I don't know if anybody else has any questions that they want to pose at this point, but we have a few minutes remaining. I know all your time is very valuable, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in either the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll be more than happy to answer.
There is one question in there that was asked by a gentleman named Martin, and he says it's been about 3 years or so since using a Carnet, and they applied for Carnets from our friendly competitor Roanoke, and he would like to ask, can we provide reasons why your service would be better than our previous vendor? Well, Roanoke's very close to me because it used to be owned by my family. So many, many years I was associated with Roanoke. My grandfather started Roanoke, and they're a very, very good company. We have a little bit of a difference in how we approach our customer service, and Roanoke tends to drive their Carnet business through their core base of customers, which are customs house brokers and freight forwarders. It's not the wrong thing to do. It's a different way of approaching getting to the export community. And, Roanoke was the first service provider in the United States for the U.S. Council for International Business. And again, we're friendly competitors, but I feel that our service is much better for the export community and how we provide the ability to get quick Carnet delivery, as well as the deployment of that Carnet in the major port cities around the country. And we've taken the paper form of Carnets from pretty much the Stone Age into the electronic age. Boomerang Carnets had the first electronic issuing system. We had the first online application. And I learned the business from the claims side, which I believe makes us better underwriters to protect our surety company, as well as the U.S. Council, who's the obligee of all these Carnet bonds. And we work very closely. And again, I'm not taking anything away from Roanoke. It's just they have a different way of delivery system, as well as a different clientele. So it changes how Carnets are obtained. And I believe we're just a little quicker, as well as a little more experienced. But with that said, if there's any other questions related to this, I can certainly answer them. Otherwise, I'll leave the floor to any other questions.
And if anybody has any questions, after this presentation, as Moira had answered one of the questions in the chat, the recording of this will be available. There is our contact information for both Boomerang and the USCIB. You can reach out to either of us, at any point, should you have any questions. It looks like Martin has another question, so he's going to work on that in just a second. But point being, going forward, both us and the council are always here to assist in any way we can. More than happy to help, after the webinar concludes as well.
Martin's working on it. I was telling Kyle before this session started that something I've been in the Carnet business for 35 plus years. And for the first time in history, I had 2 inquiries last night from cameramen going to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. that kind of taxed my logistical experience.
Especially at, what was it, 11 o'clock when you had connected with them, 11 o'clock last night?
Yeah, well, that woman was from Australia. And so I suggested she call me because I knew the time difference wouldn't, you're always a day behind Australia.
It looks like, I thought we had a raised hand somewhere. Maybe not. Okay, so Martin asks, we have had employees do hand carries. They are not experienced with carnets, but what we found out, the U.S. Customs agents at some airports are not well briefed. We had carnets come back and not signed. We then had to go back. Suggestions?
It's a common problem. I mean, customs agents are, there's been over the last few years, there's been a turnover of customs agents retiring. There's been, new influx of, junior customs officers that are not familiar with carnets. It's an ongoing educational process with customs, which they greatly appreciate. Unfortunately, right now, they're very, very taxed from the pandemic, as well as the present immigration issues that this country is confronting. But with that said, there's on the horizon, there's an ATA Carnet that's coming soon. I think that will help in the validation process, which we're looking forward to. And the U.S. Council for International Business has been very instrumental in the development as well as the testing of that product. I think that will help, as well as one of the things that Boomerang Carnets does provide is incredible amount of hand-holding at the time of application. And that is probably the key to our customer service, as well as educating the Carnet user so they do know what to assist the customs officer with, and where to validate it, and what the list means and the items, because only an exporter knows their product the best. And depending upon what the commodity is, customs sometimes needs help with that, especially if they're a junior officer. But we can certainly help you, Martin, going forward. If you'd like to try out our service, we'd be glad to take on that opportunity.
And I can add a little bit to that. And it looks like Andres, hi Andres, how are you? Good to see you here. Thanks for coming. Andres echoed the same question. We also include in each and every carnet that goes out of our office a detailed step-by-step instruction sheet that goes through page by page, box by box, exactly where, when, and how to get it stamped by customs. Even after the carnet is received, part of my job is, especially new travelers, I always welcome and encourage to call in. And when you have the carnet in your hand, call me and I'll walk through it with you. We've got resources for, customs maps at airports, walk you through exactly page by page how to get it done so that you're totally comfortable, especially an inexperienced carnet traveler. And then I think there was another question by our friend across the pond, Eric Heighton. He says, can I add another security bond to my existing carnet?
Well, the answer is yes. The question was asked a little convoluted. In the UK, there's a little bit of difference on how the security is obtained. They have the security in 3 different increments. You can get the Carnet bond for 2 months or 6 months or a full 12 months. The Carnets are always issued for 12 months, but based on how the Carnet bond scheme works in the UK, you can get a bond and pay a particular fee for that 2-month bond. If a Carnet holder needs to go on in that same country or a different country for extended period of time beyond the 2 months, you can do what they call strengthen the bond and present the bond as a 6-month bond and pay the difference in fees based on the country that you're going to. If you're staying in that same country, just you need extended more time, then there's an administrative fee that you pay because the risk stays the same. So it's quite different than the U.S. The U.S. only has a standard 40% of the value of a Carnet shipment that's required to be under bond, and it's a much easier system to manage and budget and contain your costs before you even leave the U.S. So the European Union has now standardized the risks going into a EU country since the UK has left, and it's a standard 40% now. So they're catching up to the US system, which I believe is a much easier way for US exporters to budget their overseas costs.
I'm checking all the boxes here. I don't see anything else in chat. I don't see anything else in Q&A. Don't see any raised hands. So it looks like, given our time here, we're a little bit past. So thank you all for attending. If there's any last minute questions, feel free to throw them in now. But again, on behalf of myself, Curt, Declan, Boomerang, the USCIB, we really appreciate all your attendance. Hopefully we shed some light on just how much Carnets can benefit you, especially from a cost perspective. Curt, Declan, if you guys had anything to add.
Nope. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And again, like Kyle said, I'll reiterate, if you have any questions, you'd like to reach us, the ATA Carnet helpline is available, as well as via email. We're glad to help you any way we can.
Same. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you all.